just to let you know. And yeah, I welcome you all back to our room, all our Managed Project Risk channel, and this particular unit that we'll be working on over the next couple of weeks, which we started to, as I said, and I thank you for those that were at Bankstown on campus last Wednesday evening, and the work that was done where you started to look at some of these categories. So thank you for that feedback then too, guys. We've now highlighted some of those categories of risk that we started to look at on last Wednesday evening. And there is some integration too. I think when you start to think about, like, for example, if I think about, I'll probably grab an arrow here. No, it's going to let me. Why won't you let me do that? Yeah, I'll have one of those. Thank you. When I think of human resources, I also think here of, if hopefully you can see that arrow, maybe in a bit of lighter colour might be helpful. No. Yeah, so when I think of some of these things, such as I say, human resource risk, I do think of health and safety. So we think of our people. There's a couple of areas there that might overlap. You know, we talk about health and safety. Human resources often we worry about, or we may be concerned about, that's better. We may be concerned from a human resource risk perspective where we may not be able to get the skills we need for the jobs, the tasks that are needed to be completed for our project. So that may be a human resource skill shortage. When we get them, though, we may then have health and safety risk in terms of, you know, we need to consider where an employee or a project team member may then be exposed to risks that may result in an injury, you know, or an illness in their work that they're doing for the project. So there can be some of these, there can be, you know, as I say, start to think about some of the risks that can interrelate almost, you know, some of those interdependencies as well. You might also think about some areas such as, you know, communication issues, and I'll grab another one of these arrows. Often we are very importantly communicating with our suppliers, and if we don't have the communication we need, and or perhaps it's not timely with our supplier, or perhaps it's not to the volume that the supplier needs, or perhaps there might be even a miscommunication. So that risk of communication may end up causing these sorts of supply chain, you know, resulting in some of those risks around our supply chain that we talked about last week. So I just want to spend a minute on that. What did I say? Page 18, I think it was. Yeah, in our workbook, because he started to unpack some of those key areas. But of course, there are, you know, there are linkages between these. I don't see these risk categorizations as, you know, as set in concrete. They're quite dynamic, and they will change, and they will integrate, they will impact on other areas. But I think they're a good way to start thinking about some of those areas that, you know, in terms of risk could negatively impact our projects. Can I ask you, from your experiences, and some of you may be in that project space at the moment, so you can talk to that. Others, it may be from your work now. You know, it may not necessarily be specifically through the vehicle of projects, but what you've seen in the workplace. I'd like to hear from you around how are risks, you know, we look at these categories here. We have, you know, quite a few categories of risks. How do we identify those? How do we explore those? What might be some of the steps that are taken by organisations to do that? I'm keen to hear from you about how we, you know, we basically identify these and unpack these risks. What are your thoughts?
If you think about it, the very first step that we do is, and that's part of essentially every project assessment that we do, is looking at the previous lessons learned for any similar projects. That's the first thing that we pull out within the projects as to what went wrong in the past. Pick that up, do it as a possible risk, and that's the first thing. Then you look at the second thing that you look at is your internal and your external stakeholders as to what kind of legalities are involved in that. That's like first thing that you look at is the legal perspective.
Very good points, I see. Very good.
The third thing being a government agency, the third thing that we look at is your social standing, because for private organizations, it's very easy to stand up and say, I'm just taking a name, please don't hold me on that. For example, IKEA did this or IKEA did that. In our case, they won't say that Transport for NSW did it or Fair Trading did it. They will say New South Wales government did it. So you need to look at your social risk as well. And you count that. So that's three major identification. And then after that, you go into specialization as to what kind of project you're running, what are the risks in that. For example, if we go back to our initial discussion, the digital license. The first risk that we thought was, well, it's a software, it's an app. So what happens with the software is they get hacked. Okay, so how do we make it unhackable? Second thing is it's an individual identity. How are you going to make it individual? So that's when we went ahead and added, I'm not sure if many people remember that initially when you would go in the app, it will be just a license. But then we added that hologram ever-changing into that. So that's when you look at the specialized risk involved in that specific project.
And Hasib, can I go back, sort of loop back your question here, and anyone else, please come into this discussion. It's interesting, isn't it? When you talk about getting specialist advice, say from an internal stakeholder or an external stakeholder, I'm keen to hear about how that might be done. Like, how would that communication, what might be some of the approach there with, say, a specialist that we need to get specialised feedback on a risk, how that might be done, the approach.
The first approach that we do is, obviously, if you go at the grassroots level, the first thing that you will do is identify your stakeholders. Now, those stakeholders are not it, and we're strictly talking about your risk analysis here. When you identify your stakeholders, they're not your operational stakeholders. They are what in layman's language you call the third-party users. For example, in the digital license module, the first thing that we communicated was the commissioner of police that, hey, listen, this is what we are doing right now. It was in writing through the Minister of Customer Services at that time, Victor Dominello, that this is what we are trying to do. What are your objections into it, or what are the things that you would like to be added into that? Once we made a basic blueprint of that, essentially what we did was we went onto the grassroots level and we involved the highway patrol into that.
So that would be quite, sorry, Hasib, I was going to say that would be the approach there would be maybe quite formal discussion. I mean, obviously, when you're talking about, say, other government departments, probably quite formal in the nature of that communication, you know, perhaps formal meetings or formal consultative mechanisms used to basically capture that feedback that would be documented, you know, minutes from meetings or the like.
Correct.
Excellent. Thanks, Hasib. Does anybody else have any other thoughts around how we would get the, you know, get feedback from Hasib's point? You know, I'm really keen to hear about feedback from others, you know, specialists, other experts, could be internal to our organisation or external, but how we do that, how that process helps us to investigate, you know, identify and capture risk. Basically, please.
Okay, so basically, I would. Okay, you go. No, you go. That's fine. I'll go after you. No, go for it. Go for it, Ahmed. Go for it. You go first. Thank you. I'll go after you. Good evening.
First of all, good evening, everybody. Thank you. Thanks, Lisa. See, look from the project perspective basis, I would say the stakeholders who are more experienced, knowledgeable, and who have completed a complete project cycle in the previous projects, who has witnessed a lot of turbulences in the challenging times. For example, during the COVID times, as you know, the logistics and everything took a hit.
Very good point.
It's a project, basically it's a project perspective point. Like for me, infrastructure project, the logistics and the resources would play an important and vital role. So the logistics would take a hit. So for that purpose, what were the bottlenecks in the previous project or in the previous project life cycle? Those could be the issues which needs to be highlighted and addressed.
Yes.
From the people who have been experienced and who have faced it, and to give some extra attention and see that those critical methods or critical paths are not affected by this critical resources such as the logistics, I would say. So just to identify, to bring that at the beginning of the project so that those can be addressed with the appropriate and available resources.
Very good, Mohsin. Thank you. That's great.
Thanks a lot.
Ahmed, sorry, did you want to add, or could be completely different?
It's not completely
Go ahead, please.
It's very similar, but what I was saying from the work we do, we work with a lot of construction projects.
Yes.
And usually when we start new projects, we usually have a meeting with the OH&S manager.
Very good.
Which will have more experience of what could be the risk with the projects, and obviously because he worked with different projects, he knows what's could be the potential hazard for each project. That's one perspective. Other perspective is, as Hasib said, previous projects and what happened, what incident that actually happened, and how they fixed it, and how we can take caution when dealing with any future cases.
Very good.
So yeah, most likely my point, the main focus is the OH&S manager, which is main stakeholder when it comes to risks.
Yeah, very good, Ahmed. Very good. Thank you. I think there's some really very valuable points in there from all of you that are contributing there, that there's information, data or information review, as you're saying, particularly the points that you're making about lessons learned from previous projects, which are documented. That is now a document. Previous projects have captured lessons learned. That means we need to go somewhere, find that document wherever that is archived or saved. And we review that for similarities for our project. So we start to think about specifically, exactly as you're saying, what were the lessons learned there? How could we learn from that in our planning, particularly when managing risk? What were some risks perhaps that that previous project maybe had not considered, or maybe had considered it, but might maybe not prioritize it to the level or the height of priority that it ended up, eventuating or confronting the project with. So I think there's some very good points there that you all make around reviewing organisational information, previous data or information such as lessons learned, to review that information for similarities for our project in terms of risk management. I think the other very good point is, and you've covered that from both internal and external really, but particularly talking to, whether we go and have a meeting with, we might interview, we might workshop with another expert that has, as you're saying, in Ahmed, your case, like the work health and safety manager, the person that has that expertise in health and safety. Interviewing, discussing, meeting with them is such a valuable resource to gain their perspective. So I think that's a really great approach with a specialist. or as you're saying, I guess, Hasib, in your context, where it may be even more formal consultative mechanisms there where, you know, quite formal meetings might be held or consultation might be quite formal to capture those risks or perspectives of risks for the project from those specialists, from those experts. So I think we have some really great methods there when we're talking about how do we, you know, apart from hopefully yourselves as well. Sorry, I shouldn't miss that out, should I? You guys, your own perspectives, your own, what we would often call your own professional judgment, you know, your own decision-making, your own judgment that you have given all of your experiences. So that's something that you have and you bring as a project manager to the project. But then in addition to that as well, we have the perspectives from our, you know, internal and external stakeholders, those specialists. We have them. We have the likes of, you know, other specialists that we may consult with or meet with to, you know, to gain those perspectives about risks. And then, of course, even not so much from a human perspective, but then from an information perspective, reviewing organisational information, data, previous reports, previous projects, lessons learned, and gleaning from that, what is the information in that data that can be helpful for us, similar to our project, that would identify risks, that would identify for us potential, you know, areas perhaps we hadn't considered, perhaps gaps in our risk management that would assist us in managing risk better for our project. So some fantastic ideas there, guys. Really, really good. Yeah, really good. Really nice
Lisa,
work. Yes,
Lisa,
please.
sometimes risks are interdependent as well, you know.
Yeah.
When you're looking at internal departments which are involved in
Yes.
the projects, and then it becomes critical for all department heads to come together and discuss the interdependencies of risk and come to a conclusion as to what risks we got to mitigate.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, Puneet. I mean, you might start off, and I might grab another arrow here really for the purpose of what you've said, because I often think about, say, you know, you talk about, say, financial risk, you know, the risk that the organisation may make a financial loss. And then I go back to Hasib, your point about, you know, technology when you're talking about digital projects basically, and the risk of those being hacked, you know. So there's this risk to technology, and obviously if that risk, you know, if there is a breach to that technology, that can often result in financial risk. So yeah, I agree, Puneet, there's many interdependencies within risk where it is requiring, you know, a head of finance or a head of technology needing to come together, and
or even for that matter legal.
Yes, absolutely.
Legal plays
yeah.
a very important
Another one
role
as well. Absolutely. It's almost like, isn't it? We'll go the many different ways here, where we'll come back this way as well, and then put another one in here, because it's all of these interrelationships. Nothing happens in a vacuum, does it? And so we're seeing these arrows start to move across our page in terms of our risk categorization, and the need, of course, exactly as you said, Puneet, so important to bring these specialists together, you know, these experts together, if it is head of finance or head of legal or our legal counsel, head of IT, technology, bringing those key people or key team members together within those teams to have the, you know, to brainstorm, basically, to sit around the table and talk about this, you know, these risks for our project and the impact of it. And of course, importantly, what can we do about, you know, if these risks are a priority, what do we need to put in place to manage them, to control, you know, risk control. So fantastic, guys. Really great. Anybody else? Any other thoughts or observations? I'll just hop. Let me get
Lisa.
rid of this.
Hi, Lisa,
Yeah.
and everyone.
Hello.
Hi. If I may add, please.
Please, Nadia, please.
Last year during COVID, we all have suffered and impacted by COVID. So what we did is we had a partnership project in the local community, and we involved health to educate our community on the risk and its factors on the broader community, and especially those cold communities. So what happened is a risk plan was created.
Very good.
And we consulted with the broader community through teams and bilingual staff, as well as translated material. We communicated the message that health will be providing pop-up clinics, vaccination clinics, as well as testing clinics. And all the communities have been advised, but also what we did is we provided, health provided bilingual staff, as well as our community provided bilingual staff, and all signs verbally and visually were displayed in the location to ensure the safety and well-being of the community is well maintained, and they've been educated effectively in terms of, like, you know, the risk factor for disobeying and those rules. So they all been advised about the importance of adhering to COVID safety rules. And also community radio has been involved and so on. So this is very important. Like we're talking about the project risk. If everybody involved, effective communication, consultation in place.
I think that's such a key. I mean, often, you know, we talk about it so much, don't we? Consultation, particularly in work health and safety. But I think exactly, Nadia, is such a great point around the role of consultation in bringing communities together and
absolutely.
having those discussions from a really, I mean, you can have discussions with a range of stakeholders, but I think with community, it's having that balance, isn't it? You know, so many different, a well-rounded representation of community that gives input to those discussions about risk, and then is enabled part of that, you know, things that, you know, you and I might sit around and think of many aspects of risk, but we may not think of all of them. And so by having community involvement and that, you know, that exactly as you're saying, Nadia, wonderful, that consultation is so important. Engaging with that at that level to bring all of those different perspectives together is so important. Yeah, wonderful.
And risk plan also, if I may add, when it was created, so every organization were given the opportunity to provide their feedback, and also in line with the community we responded to, like, you know, whether it is like, you know, a Chinese community, whether it is the Arabic community, the Greek community, bilingual staff from all those communities were present to communicate the message. Thank you.
Yeah. That's so good, Nadia. I think it's so important, isn't it, that when we do consult, as you said, the need for consultation, and when we do consult, particularly when we're talking about risk, you know, trying to get those, garner those different perspectives, but how important language is. Exactly, Nadia, that when we engage at community level, at expert level, at specialists, you know, are there language issues to consider, you know, barriers potentially that could in some way negatively impact the communication on capturing risk, on capturing perspectives on risk. And so putting strategies, even controls around that in identifying risk is so important through those communication efforts, as you're saying, such as, you know, translations or interpreters, or even, as you're saying, some of that visual material, you know, what is it? A picture tells 1,000 words. And how powerful that can be to support community members and other stakeholders in the community to come together and share, you know, more freely and more openly, because we have addressed some of those communication challenges. Thanks, Nadia.
That's fantastic.
Okay, wonderful. So would anybody else like to add any other ways that we can engage with our experts to gain perspectives on risk, to identify risk, to get perspectives on risk, because they're all different, aren't they? We all have different perspectives.
I'm so sorry, Lisa. Can you please repeat your question? I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. You had really your example, Hasib, has answered that with, you know, when you were talking about consulting with the police or commissioner of police initially for feedback on risks regarding digital licenses. So I think you've done that very nicely. I was just wondering if anybody else had any other examples or ideas on consulting to get perspectives on risk.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Hasib, please.
Ahmed.
Hasib, you want to say something?
So incorrigible, Ahmed. You are so.
I'm trying to benefit the staff. I'm trying to benefit everyone from Hasib's experience. That's
you
it.
Are so.
No,
go ahead, Hasib.
No,
I thought you had an example there, Ahmed. I was going to ask you what's your example, but then you did, because you talked about the work health and safety manager as an expert, and you talked about the need to consult with that expert because of issues that had arisen or risks that had been encountered on previous construction projects. So I can't even say, come on, Ahmed, because you've also contributed.
Ahmed, that's Lisa's way of saying, can you two stay quiet and let somebody else talk?
I understood that. Thank you.
You are too bad. All right. In the interim, can I please drive page 16 of our workbook, please? Let me take a look. Hopefully this will, and please feel free to add, even Ahmed and Hasib. Page 16, guys, talks about interviewing, or page 16 and 17, I should say. Yeah, talks about interviewing others, talks about Delphi technique and informed opinion. Now, I think we've covered this quite nicely. Oh, sorry, and documentation review. So I might work backwards from page 18 first. Documentation review is a very useful review, and I think we've really talked about that. As a great example was lessons learned from previous projects that were documented as part of lessons learned that can be very helpful to identify risks for our projects, similarities from those previous projects that those previous project managers had documented as lessons learned. Reviewing those lessons learned, those documents, would be helpful. We have a few more examples here. We've also got previous risk registers and risk management plans, so actual risks that have been documented, previous hazard logs and incident reports, and that might fall into, for example, Ahmed, your point, around the work health and safety example, that might be supported with, say, reviewing previous hazard or incident reports. Yes, go ahead, please.
In this area, apart from the previous risk register and the hazard logs, it does help a lot when we do monitor the continuation of the hazards occurring. And in this area, it may give us a better opportunity to constantly monitor and review the process and perhaps implement new changes. And when there is a lack of improvement in the area, it may help us to consult with the WHS officer or contact the local council for a safety audit to check what is the causes, the ongoing issues. It may be something it could have been easily minimized, but when we do have the safety audit, that would give us a better understanding to review the process, but also check if there is an opportunity to improve through new implementation.
Very good, Nadia. Yeah, that's talked to that last bullet point very well around audits. Well done, definitely. The role of audit, and obviously the documentation we have from an audit that then, as you're saying, then identifies for us, provides additional information, additional perspectives around risk that we can also consider relevant to this project, our project. Thanks, Nadia.
Yeah,
fantastic. Brilliant. Oh, that's another one too. Sorry, we sort of haven't really talked to that, have we? I think we've talked about our customers.
Yes, their feedback.
Because they may actually have identified through providing feedback and not all feedback, it may not always be positive, but it could have been a complaint even to say that this is an issue, you know, that we may then be able to look at that those documents, that documented feedback for potential risks for future projects as well.
And we could have been in like contributing indirectly to this risk. Like, you know, when the clients or customers providing the feedback, it could have been an external environment, or like, you know, the physical environment of the provider not satisfying the medical needs of those community who are accessing the facility.
Very good point, Nadia. Very good point. Very good. And even might come down to, and I'll scroll back here, some of this informed what I call professional judgment, you know, whether that's from ourselves, you know, in terms of us as a project manager, our sponsor, you know, the person that's obviously has oversight on our project. Generally, they're paying for the project, they're financing our project, they have oversight, so they will have a perspective on risk. And then, of course, our team, ourselves, and as you're saying, exactly, external contractors, those specialists that we have hired specifically for their technical expertise will also have perspectives, exactly as you're saying, Nadia, on risk as well.
Yeah.
Great examples, guys. Fantastic.
Lisa,
yes, please go ahead.
One thing I don't see in documentation review is the change request.
Yes.
Change request can also, you know, give a lot of in-depth to what the risks are.
Very good. Yeah, that's a really good point. So, you know, we have our project. Obviously, we have our project and what we've got, you know, what we planned, the plan of what was to be developed, whatever we're delivering, whatever our deliverables are. But of course, you know, once we start work, things change. Change management, exactly, Puneet. And the documentation of those changes will also provide us with, particularly changes in previous projects would identify potential risks for future, or similar, where there's similarities between projects, would also give us perspectives on risks. It's a really good example. Thanks, Puneet. Did you want to add to that? Sorry, I got
No, that's fine. I just wanted to make a point because I didn't see change requests, because it gives you an insight to why the changes were made and what are the possible risks in the current project from the past experience. Yeah.
Absolutely. And often too, you know, what we said last week, isn't it? You know, when we're in the planning mode, it's risk. Once we're doing work, we're actually in implementation, you know, we're actually doing project work. It becomes an issue, you know, and it's those issues, as you're saying, that we then have to respond to and change. You know, what was the issue that we had to have that change request to address that issue? And so if we'd done a little bit more perhaps in that planning stage around risk and use that as a lessons learned for future projects, that then enables us to be much better equipped in terms of our risk management process. Yeah. Good example. Good example. What else? Oh, Delphi. Has anybody heard of this? Delphi. The Delphi technique involves getting a group of experts. So a group of experts, not just one expert. You know, we talk about like Ahmed with your work health and safety manager. This is a group of experts. So this is, you know, a collective, a group of experts to answer questionnaires anonymously. That's the key, anonymously. So they don't feel threatened. They don't feel that they have to validate, reinforce. They can just express their view on risk. Their responses are aggregated in the form of statistical representation. We might do basically some collation around, you know, how many of them, maybe they had to prioritise risks. So we looked at different ways of prioritising, how many maybe scored risks higher. So some sort of aggregation, some sort of statistical representation. The process is repeated several times. Each round aims to reduce the range of responses until a group consensus is reached. The main benefit of using this technique, Delphi technique, is that the information obtained will come from experts. And often this can help us, as I say, particularly where we're looking at, say, ranking risks, trying to prioritise. We may have a whole list of risks for our project, through the consultation that we've run, through the review of data, documentation, as you're saying, lessons learned, previous change requests, previous issues in previous projects. And then we have a whole list. And maybe we could use the Delphi technique to then start to use or gain, I should say, feedback on which risks are more important, which risks maybe have a greater potential to negatively impact our project, perhaps more severe, perhaps a greater consequence. Perhaps they may happen more often. So it's around frequency, a higher level of frequency. Delphi technique can be very helpful because it enables us to bring a group of experts together to try and process these risks and understand them better for our project, you know. Anybody got an example? Maybe you've used something like this before where you've used, as I said, a group of experts is really something that's important here, where we might get feedback from a group of experts on risk. Does anybody have any? Somebody wanted to add there? I might have cut you off.
A toolbox talk?
Ah, toolbox talk. Tafara, thank you for that. A toolbox talk. So what is a toolbox talk? Let's unpack this a little bit more as a group. Would you like to tell me about a toolbox talk, Tafara, or maybe someone else who has experience with toolbox talks?
It's a short representation that may occur during like the project or like the day. Is that what you're trying to reference?
Sorry, I cut you off there. Can you say that again? No, please go ahead.
Was that the example you were requesting?
That's great, Tafara. That's great. So a toolbox is done generally with those that are working in a particular area, say on our project, and they have a certain level of expertise, and we would be sharing information with them about that toolbox talk for feedback. Yes, very good. Mohammed, were you going to add? Sorry, I'm not sure if you had a point there or...
Lisa, Delphi technique is also loosely stated as elimination by consensus.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's because you're consenting to eliminate certain points and then reaching a consensus to what you need to implement.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. Consensus where we have agreement. Consensus about, not just voting on risk saying, oh, who votes this as the first. It's actually discussing consensus, trying to share perspectives to then have a shared understanding, an agreement that, yes, these are the risks that we see as being the highest priority. These are the risks that we see as being, a mid-level of priority and then the lowest level of priority. And to enable us to do that, basically having this type of process where these experts can share information to try and work that through to explore that risk, really, I think, Puneet. Yeah. And what about this one? Interviewing. How can interviewing, or how might you, how could you, when you hear this, when you're thinking about interviewing to get perspectives on risk for our project, how could that help? Or you might have an example, or you might think about, oh, that might be interesting, how we could use interviewing to help us understand risk for our project.
In interviewing, what you can do, Lisa, is first thing, you need to choose an industry expert. That's the first thing, because although you may be a qualified project manager, but let's just take an example of CRM. Right? you're a qualified project manager, but you're not a qualified IT expert.
IT, very good, very good.
You need to understand, say, for example, what is the equipment that you're going to need? How long does it take? What are the prerequisites? What is the aftermath? What is the troubleshooting? So you need to understand, they need to give you the pointers for you to then analyze the risk. Then you come to your, what I was referring to previously as your operational stakeholders, the people who will be using it. What are they expecting out of it? From the expectation, you then analyze your risks, saying, okay, they're expecting out of it, but what if it does not happen?
Yes.
Right. Then your third one is essentially, I'm just focusing or isolating on the example of CRM. The third one could be a supplier. You talk to your supplier, okay, what's your experience in this field? What is the background? What is your financial capability? And from there, you can involve the risk. Okay, they don't have any experience in supplying such software. Number two, they don't have any experience in supplying such equipment, or vice versa. So depending on their answer, your risk either goes to the higher one, just like in our risk register, the highest being 3, which is critical. You could either go critical or minimal. So you need to choose your interviewing audience is not the right word, but you need to interview the correct people in order to have isolated risk or the correct risk analysis.
I think that's that whole point, isn't it, around when we talk about, expertise, someone that, expert as in experience, they've had that experience where they can demonstrate previously.
Yes, I think I've lost you.
As well. Very good, Hasib, thank you. Anybody else have any other perhaps ideas or examples of interviewing, how you might use interviewing with a particular group or individual, an expert or experts to gain perspectives on risk for our project? Any other thoughts?
I don't know, maybe I may have missed one of the participants mentioning this. Like normally I would look at the project description. What do we want to achieve from that? And then identify like the question in consultation with the reference group or the committee to look at Nadia. What do we want to achieve and how do we achieve it, and what could, like, the potential risk factors might be. So this would support us to avoid any, I guess, like, unexpected risk during the process.
Yeah, very good, very good. And I think what you're saying too, Nadi, with something like that just that, again, probably looping back to your point before, the importance of that type of consultative approach again, where we're, and we can consult with, like you've said, like communities for general feedback. We can also consult with field experts, those in their field that, whether it's, Hasib, your point around, IT or technology experts that would have very specific learnings from those projects that they've been involved before, and can therefore give us very specific feedback, particularly when we're talking about risk, obviously in this unit. And we start to think about the role, as you're saying, Nadia, how important that is, that, engaging with those experts for those perspectives, in line with exactly what you're saying, your description of your project, your scope. What is our project about? Yes. And therefore, once we understand, well, what are we actually delivering? Whose perspectives do we need on that in terms of, gaining perspectives on risk?
I'll give you an example, Lisa,
please.
about the interviewing process. So we were implementing a large video wall project for Department of Transport, which was a very complex. It was for the operational room looking at all the floodplains across New South Wales. Because it was a complex project, we got head of Samsung technology, and we interviewed him. It was a process where we involved him to understand the issues that we could be facing implementing the project. And it was done very formally, having the Department of Transport, ourselves as implementers and consultants, as well as Samsung head of technology, discussing the potential issues.
So that was done in a meeting. It was a structured meeting, or
it was a structured meeting. Everybody knew why they were there for, specifically to discuss the potential issues that could come up while implementing the project, and the probable causes for failures when we implemented that.
But certainly interviewing that expert, in terms of what you're saying, Department of Transport, then to get those their particular issues or I guess perspectives on those risks that could negatively impact the project.
As well as Samsung's perspective on implementing those video walls. How could it affect the technology which the transport was using? So
very good, Vinit. Thank you. Great perspectives, guys. Well done. Fantastic. So I think we've talked about our method. Yeah, so I was just looking at that just to get a bit of an idea. As I always say to you, this workbook is here. It's a reading resource for you. But it's nice to, I'd like to just pick on some of, identify some of these key points and then open up the discussion. So I thank you all for those contributions. Fantastic. We talked interviewing. We've talked Delphi technique, informed opinions, and documentation review, and of course our categories we started with. Now this is another one, a SWOT analysis. Have you heard of that before? SWOT. SWOT stands for strength. Yeah, strengths. S for strengths.
Weaknesses.
Yeah, W for weaknesses.
And opportunities. And the time frame.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Very good. And threats in that as well. And obviously, yes, we would have, we'd have timing around. We've got a page in our workbook. What is it? Page 19. Our SWOT. The strengths of our project, the weaknesses of our project, the opportunities our project may be provided with, and then, of course, the threats that could cause trouble. May threaten. Obviously, that's definitely the risk area. These are obviously this is a tool. This is a tool that you can use that can be quite helpful. Obviously, often project managers would use a tool like this to, unpack not just risk. Obviously, it can be specifically in our instance, because we're looking at risk in this unit. This is part of our managing project risk function. And this is where this may be relevant, particularly where we start looking at, the weaknesses. What are we doing that, as a project may expose the project? There may be weaknesses to that. And so that may then, we may then expose the project to risk. Alternately, opportunities may, we talk about risk. It's not always the negative. What opportunity can we see in that risk? What sort of, how can we leverage from that risk and gain advantage from that risk, an opportunity? And of course, threats that, as it says, something that may cause trouble for our project. That's SWOT analysis. Any other thoughts on a SWOT analysis and how that could be relevant, or how it might be used if we're talking about identifying risks for our project?
The beauty of it, it's about identifying our strengths in terms of looking at what's working really well, how are we progressing, the things we are doing really well as a team, to continue that, focus on where our input is needed, so that on its own, its strengths, and also weaknesses to look at, like, you know, is my team being effectively engaged? Are we focusing on the areas we do need to make a progress on? Are we lacking the funding, the resources? Are we lacking, like, you know, the partnership? What is our weaknesses, and how can we improve it in order for us to be able to progress and succeed in the project?
Very good, Nadia. Very good. Very good. Thank you for sharing that. Fantastic.
That's okay.
Fantastic. And this can be, you know, amongst other methods, as we've said, you know, we've talked about the importance of engaging with our experts, whoever they may be, as a group. You know, we talk about that Delphi technique as a group, or individually when we talk about maybe interviewing, you know, or consulting with those experts for perspectives. This can also be something that's quite helpful, particularly for the project team, almost a tool that the team can, you know, as a team, sit around as a project team and really brainstorm and say, well, you know, what are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? What are the opportunities facing us? What threats? And often their opportunities and threats can be more from, I guess, an external perspective outside the project team that may be confronting us, that we, you know, we need to be mindful of when we're looking at our risk management approach for our project. So this can be a wonderful tool for that discussion. As said, we still have those discussions with experts and the consultation, but something like this can be quite helpful for the project team, even as a tool to use to support the identification of risk for our project. Yeah. Thanks for that, Nadia. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Nice. Anybody else like to add any thoughts or perspectives on
May I ask a question?
Yeah, please. Questions are welcome. Graciously, please go ahead.
Could the strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats could be like I'm just gonna use an example Patty gave about the Sansan project. Could a strength that they were able to communicate with the Sansan provider would be an opportunity, but maybe a threat, maybe timing or not having the full idea of scope? Could that be like
absolutely
changeable?
Yeah,
somehow?
very much so, very much. And exactly what we said, you know, when we started, Tara, saying about those interdependencies, something that we start off, and it may be a strength, you know, it may be a strength that the team has, but it could also be something that may, you know, there may be a threat as part of that as well. You know, you could have a strength, just an example. We talk about human resources, say a strength could be that we have a fantastic expert. You know, we might have, going to Hasib's point of technology, we've got this fantastic IT expert, you know, wonderful, I don't know, software engineer, brilliant, real strength. But that can also be a threat because those skills are in demand in the marketplace and there is a skill shortage for those skills, those sorts of technology skills. So we could lose that person. We may have a real strength having them, but it could be a threat that they could be lost to the project. They may go, you know, could be headhunted to another job role or another project, paid more money, and we lose that expertise. So it could be a strength at that point in time, but it could also be a threat confronting our project, you know, if we lost them. So I think exactly that, Tafara. I think it's just very dynamic. It's very changeable, and what we see at one moment in time can significantly change through the life of our project.
Thank you for the explanation.
Hopefully that answers your question, kind of, anyway. Gets you thinking.
It did.
Good on you, Tafara. Anybody else? Any other thoughts or? Pretty much it for topic one. I think that's pretty much, yeah. Oh, this was a good one. Yes, we haven't talked about, this is an activity. I don't usually do these because they're in the workbook, they're at the end of each topic, and they're what are they, like short answer, multiple choice, or forced rating, or whatever the case may be. And the answers are in the back of the book. So, but I would just like to talk to this idea of risk appetite, risk tolerance, and risk threshold. Risk appetite. Now, we've got some notes on this. Let me just scroll back to, yes, exactly. Thank you. Thank you. Is that right? Yes, brilliant. Risk appetite. The level of uncertainty that a stakeholder is prepared to accept. Basically, their appetite for risk. Their appetite for risk. And we talk about 5 levels of risk appetite. Is our stakeholder risk averse? You know? They try and avoid it, basically. Averse. Is it minimal? Cope more with lower options of risk, lower levels, I should say, of risk. Probably not options, lower levels of risk. Cautious. Again, lower levels of risk. But can only product limited reward are preferred. Okay, so yeah, okay, so one is saying very low level of risk, but then also where there is some level of reward. Okay. Versus open. All potential levels of risk are considered, but obviously must get a return on that. There has to be a return on that risk. And then lastly, hungry. Options that potentially provide higher rewards. So that is probably the highest level in terms of a risk appetite. More open to risk, more open than open, isn't it? Hungry, it's saying they would consider greater levels of risk. Hungry. And often that's around that risk reward calculation. We'll consider greater levels of risk because the reward often will be greater. So there's a few labels there to think about: averse, minimal, cautious, open, and hungry when we talk about risk appetite. Risk appetite. So when you look at your own organisations, you don't have to name them or protect all parties involved, but I'm keen to hear from you. When you look at them, could you label them as a level based on that risk, or those 5 levels of risk appetite? Would you consider them to be averse or minimal, cautious, open, or hungry?
In order for you, I guess, to manage as effective as possible, I do believe we do need to name them, label them, and also be very innovative in identifying those levels of risk in order for us to overcome or minimize the risk factor.
Good point, Nadia. Good point.
And this may include, like, financial risk, external risk. All those risks may be going to be challenging us during the process of the project. But as long as we are open, transparent about considering this could happen, and in fact that would give us an opportunity to be able to be more innovative, to have like simple toolkit to minimize it, to avoid it if we can.
Yeah. So can you think, thank you for that, Nadia, fantastic. And Nadia, you might have an example, or others. Can you think of an example where a stakeholder might be averse? Say that first one that we have here on our labels, an example maybe where a stakeholder might be averse, avoiding risk. Yeah, please, Nadia, if you...
sometimes, like, let's say you've got HR team. And they're not probably skilled and equipped with the necessary tools. They could be perhaps working very limited hours, and the demand on the organization is very high. Like, you know, submitting invoices, finalizing fees and so on, debt and all those things. So this is where you can try to avoid it by, I guess, reviewing the process of your current practice.
Yeah, very good, very good. So it might even be looking at, you know, our procedures even at the moment,
Yes.
and through a procedural review, then supporting, you know, obviously we might be quite adverse at the moment because we haven't got the perhaps resources to do that. And so we need to then orchestrate a way to do that or support that. It's very good.
Review, you know, put your recommendation once again in consultation with the team involved, and also checking their skills and abilities, and also willingness to increase their hours if there is a need to increase the hours, and your budget does allow that.
Good example, Nadia. Good example. Thank you so much. Anybody else have any examples of risk appetite that you might like to share? Any thoughts, or might even just be an observation?
Open. Now, open is essentially, if I go back to the project that we will be doing, your CRM, now that will be your stakeholders or your part of organization where it's the team. They for a new CRM. They needed it, but they didn't ask for it.
Yeah, yeah.
However, at the same time, they don't even know what to expect. They're telling you their needs. Hence the reason they are considering all the potential options. But the option that will be delivered, they're only looking at the successful results, or at least something that they can
good. That's it. Yeah, very good, because that's the outcome, isn't it? That's often we articulate that in, you know, our business case, the benefits. What's the benefits, like you're saying, say with a CRM you know, what are the benefits of this project? So they're aware of that, perhaps not even understanding what the CRM, as you're talking about, in detail is, but perhaps understanding, well, what does it mean? You know, perhaps the productivity gains or the marketing gains about being able to engage with our customers or clients through this new CRM project would obviously then make them more open, in a sense, to that risk. Yeah. Good example, Jose. Good example. Thank you. Enough on that. What about this one? Risk tolerance. Risk tolerance refers to the readiness of an organisation to absorb the residual risk. Residual risk is defined as a remaining risk after risk treatment. So we have a risk, we've identified it, we've assessed it, we've even put controls around it. We have a risk treatment plan. Following all of this, we accept the risk. We've done what we can, essentially. We have the risks identified, we have the treatments articulated, we have planning around, you know, in terms of risk management, our function of risk management. And then we obviously absorb that residual risk, the risk that remains. It remains there. We cannot remove it. It cannot be removed. So we may still have a level of risk that's associated. So we'll go to, Hasib, your CRM. We have a level of residual risk. We have firewalls, we have security. You know, we talk about our cyber security as controls for our risk treatment plan, but there's still a chance, there's still residual risk around security of that system. But we then accept that risk tolerance. Oh, Hasib, are you, I missed you there. Might be me.
No, my mic was mute. Sorry about that.
No, good. Oh, good.
This is a very broad, I should say, gray area. Why? Your risk tolerance essentially has multiple variables involved. However, to name a few, first of all, your organization. The variable involved in that is, for example, an organization like Samsung, all right? If they are implementing a new CRM, their risk tolerance is very low because their data integrity is everything to them. But if it's an offshore contact center, their tolerance is very high because at the end of the day, what do they have to lose? So it really
also
variables.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. I think there's a couple of things when we talk, and we think about our projects and throughout the life cycle, we initiate a project, we
Can't hear you. We lost you, Lisa.
Yeah, we lost you. Can't hear you.
Oh, am I back?
Yep.
Yeah. I might just turn the camera off for a minute because just to use sound. Yeah, thanks for that, Tan. Let me know. Yeah, what I was going to say was that as we move through the project life cycle, we initiate a project and we then go through our planning, and obviously there's quite a bit of planning here in our, talking about managing risk, identifying risk, assessing risk, considering risk, getting perspectives on risk, consulting. That's all planning. They're all part of that planning process, planning risk. Then we start work, our project work, whatever it is we've planned. And then we obviously monitor the work that we're doing. And at the same time, we're constantly monitoring risks. So the risks will change throughout the project. And I think perhaps building on your point, Hasib, as well, is that the risks also change depending on different perspectives of those stakeholders. We could have a perspective from a manager in the finance team, and they may be very risk averse, because of the financial impact. But then we might go to someone else in the marketing team, and they are very, entrepreneurial. So their whole risk appetite is different again. And so we have this ever-changing perspective of risk and even tolerance for risk, depending on our different stakeholders and depending on where we're at in the project life cycle. At different stages as risks, risks will change throughout our project. They will change throughout, from initiation to planning to implementation to monitoring to closure. Those risks will change. And so we are constantly, it's a very dynamic area, managing project risk. We're constantly reviewing it. And yeah, I think, Hasib, that's a very good point. Different stakeholders having different perspectives on risk, different appetites for the risk. And obviously that they even change throughout the project depending on where we're at in that life cycle. Yeah. Any other thoughts? And then lastly, just to finish off, I think that's pretty much given us then our identification with, yeah. Is threshold, the risk threshold. Measuring the degree of uncertainty and level of impact. Trying to assign a specific value to the amount of risk. What stakeholders are willing to accept? Will they accept, a low level of risk, a medium level of risk, a high level of risk? What will be the threshold? Whatever that may be. Obviously, that can be a moving feast as well. But that will be a threshold that we agree with our stakeholders. What's the point of that? Why would we want to try and develop with our stakeholder, say our project sponsor, or our stakeholder, it might be our client, or our customer, or our end user? Why would we try and have a discussion around risk to understand the risk, the level of risk that they will accept? Why would that be important? Why would that be helpful? What are your thoughts?
That's about being accountable for.
Yeah, how do you mean, Nadia?
Like it's about being acknowledging the depths of the risk,
very good,
but also agreeing, like, you know, how this will be I guess looked at, managed, reviewed, what necessary steps do we put in place in order for us to be in control.
Yes, very good. And I think that key word, we talk about agreement, you know, when we're talking about, you know, consulting with stakeholders, we may actually need to get approval. Some of our stakeholders, you know, we talk about, say, sponsor approving our project, sponsor also approving the risk management plan for our project. You know, what is our position on risks? What is our position in terms of this threshold? You know, how much will we actually accept? What do we agree to that? What does sponsor agree to then progress our project?
Or it could have been like a clause added to the MOU in this sort of areas. What would be the next step? How do we take control of this risk if it does occur?
Oh, very good. When you say, Nadia, MOU, Memorandum of Understanding. Very good.
So we can add a clause so we can all agree, like, you know, each partner will be part of this project. They will all have a equal I guess equal role play, equal responsibility. So when we identify this in the MOU, so we all agreed that this is the steps will be taken in order for us to be in control if this risk occur.
Very good, very good. And I think really important when you're talking about different stakeholders, you know, depending on, obviously, you know, we go back to it, don't we, that authority, you know, who has authority, over in terms of the oversight of our project, but also in terms of risk management, what their role is in risk management. And then, as you're saying, you know, having this agreement, what is the agreed tolerance, you know, in terms of saying, well, this is what we will actually accept for our project. This is then our threshold. Yeah. The line almost, isn't it? The level of risk. Yeah. Thanks, Nadia. Fantastic. Brilliant. Okay. Anybody else like to talk about any of those terms, actually? You want to talk about threshold or appetite? Or tolerance in terms of our project? Appetite, tolerance, threshold.
It's also important to include the end customer expectations. Risk tolerance is also governed by the expectation that the end customer has of the project and how to use those tools after we deliver those projects. So it depends on the tolerance and what is acceptable to the end user.
So tell me a little bit about that, Puneet. What obviously, if we're in the planning stage, we would need that consultation. You know, I guess that's building on Nadia's point before about, you know, consultation with the end user for their expectations.
It's just not about, you know, when you're starting the project, it is a continuous process during the project as well, because there might be different risks arising while you're delivering the project. And then when you consult with the end user about the risk and, you know, the consequences of those risks while you're delivering the project, you have to consult with the end user whether it's acceptable to the end user or not. Lisa? Hello?
Probably she lost connection.
Yeah, I think she's back again.
Yeah, can't hear her.
How's that? Is that better? Do we have
You're
sound?
back. Excellent.
Oh, Lisa, we've got you back.
Yeah.
Yay! Yay!
It's the longest
Yay.
2 seconds of my life.
Oh, I'm sorry, Vivian.
Was it
I
2
don't
seconds
ever mean,
or how long?
I don't mean to do that, Vivian. I'm so
It's
sorry. I'm so sorry. This is one of our risks, isn't it?
That's
It is.
Lisa. That should have been in your project plan.
That's exactly. This is our risk. This is exactly
It's
why
tolerance.
Vivian is the risk control. This is exactly why Vivian is here.
That's a
because
plan B. Excellent.
it'll happen. It will happen. Hopefully not too often, but it will. It will. Very good, guys. Very good. What else did I want to talk to? I think we've covered, as I say, this workbook and all of the content is all there. I just like to pick up some key points and explore those with as a group. It's great. It's fun, actually. I really enjoy the discussion. I love listening to you and getting your perspectives and understanding. Oh, this is a good one. Yes, page 26, levels of likelihood. This is when we start talking about the risks we've identified and analysing them. Likelihood, almost certain, likely, occasional, unlikely, rare. We start to label them, basically. We start to try and identify the level of risk. How likely is it that it will occur?
Yeah.
Have any of you used any of these labels? I'm keen to hear from you across your organisation in terms of your risk management. Yeah, Nadia?
I've used them in different colors. Like, you know, when we organized, let's say, outdoor activities.
Yes.
So hazard check being conducted. So we completed the risk assessment and went through the different stages of the likelihood of the risk, but each risk area was colored based on the highs, like, you know, how often is it going to happen, like what's the likelihood of this occurring, that's the sort of things. And it was also completed once again in partnership with local service providers and police, SES, all those services, they were involved because some of them, let's say SES were checking, like, you know, monitoring traffic, police, all those things will be consulted and agreed upon, and then each risk, who would be the initial person to follow up on this identified risk.
And so you'd be consulting for these levels of likelihood, Nadia? You'd actually get feedback?
In consultation with key partners.
Very good. Thanks, Nadia. Fantastic. Fantastic. Anybody else got any experience with these types of labels that have been used to start to understand how likely a risk, you know, we're now looking at the risks that we've identified, how likely they might be to occur in our project?
Talking about me, almost certain in everything.
What was that?
So talking about me and my projects, almost certain in everything. Every consequence is expected to occur.
Oh, so you didn't often get the lovely label of rare showing in your risk assessment there, Hasib.
No. Everything's green. Green's the best color.
Lots of almost certain.
With the it again depends, right? How good was your analysis, right? How good was your interviewing, right? It's like, how soon can it happen? What are the probabilities of happening? And then again, an example, let's go back to CRM, all right? CRM is a web-based or an internet-based software, but what if we chose for this to be centralized server-based software that will only run within one building? We need servers for that, right? Everything is going online. All of a sudden, COVID happened. Sorry, supply chains are diminished. Now, you cannot get the equally good but cheaper alternative from a certain part of the world.
Yes.
You need to choose something expensive from US. Now, in your mind, what is it? It's rare.
Yes. Right? Yep. Yep. 1 in 100 years. That's exactly what. Yeah. Exactly.
But then, if you go back and think of another example, it's in CRM implementation, and your supplier is supposed to supply you with the hardware as well. Now, if you remember, I'm unsure as to which project was it, but there was a telephony software that we were doing as a project. Now, the supplier needs to supply you with the headgears as well. It's okay if we did not get Cisco, we'll go for Jabra. The price difference is like $5-10, but it's occasionally it could happen. They were changing their models and they did not have the models that we initially decided. Not a problem, we can go back. So it really depends on what the risk is and then the likelihood of that happening.
Yeah, very good. I think too, can I just say here where we have, and obviously each organisation will have their tools. I need to make that very clear around their labels. You know, when we're talking, we've obviously got labels that have been provided here in our workbook and our guidelines. The helpful part with something like this, and as I said, your organisation may be different. This is not meant to be these other labels for every organisation in every project, but they are an exemplar. The great thing about the guideline here, it does start to put here in this far right column some timelines, exactly what Hasib said, some timelines around when we talk about, you know, the likelihood. Often this is, you know, referred to as the probability. How probable is it that this could occur? And I think the guidelines are helpful here because we can start to think, well, is it, you know, we're expecting this to happen every month or once a year or once a year to 10 years, you know? Or is it every 10 years to 100, or is it every 100 years? And it just gets us to start thinking about the frequency of this potentially occurring, how often would it occur, and then that enables us to go back almost from the guideline then into what's our label based on that, or the definition of that, what, you know, what we would then label as being almost certain or likely or occasionally or unlikely or rare. Good examples, guys, good examples. Yeah, as it says, yeah, the guidelines and description only serve as an example. Yeah, exactly. They may vary, yes, exactly. That's a good exemplar, though, a very good exemplar. And then we talk about, impact of risk. Impact of risk. Impact to cost, impact to schedule, impact to scope, impact to quality. What could that risk do? Could it mean that we have a change? We have to manage change, which means increased cost or increased schedule, additional time, delays, slippage, as it says here, schedule slippage, schedule delays, scope, change to scope. Work may need to be reviewed, taking work out of scope, perhaps. Scope may be affected. Maybe we may need to go back and revisit scope and reduce scope. Or if we bring it into scope, we may need to bring work into scope, or we maintain scope, but it will have an impact on cost or impact on schedule time. So we can see these impacts of risk if they do occur. You know, if our project is indeed confronted with these risks, the impact could be to our project, particularly those constraints we talk about often, your time, cost, scope, and of course, impacting quality. Good examples there on page, sorry, I should give you a page 27. And then we actually have almost what we call a risk matrix. Yeah, risk matrix. Let's get it on one page. When we start talking about the relationship between impact and probability, how likely is it to occur? Let's go here. Yes, that's better. That's our matrix. How likely is the risk to occur? How likely might it occur? And that's those labels we just talked about, almost certain, likely, occasionally, unlikely, rare. And if it does occur, the consequence, is it insignificant, minor, moderate, major, or catastrophic? And then we look at basically the relationship between likelihood. It's almost an intersection, isn't it, on our grid? If it is almost certain but insignificant, it'll be up in this high. Or if it's rare, considered to be occurring, what did we say, 1 in 100 years, rare and insignificant, be down in this low. But then if it's almost certain to happen, it happens every month. And if it does, it is major. We're up in this very high category. The point of intersection between likelihood and consequence. How likely is it? What is the probability of occurring? And at the same time, if it does, what's the consequence, the severity of it? And that's how we start to get these levels then of risk, where we look at low, moderate or medium, high, or even very high levels of risk. That's how we prioritise risk. That's the tool we use from our consultation, our interviewing, our review, our professional judgment, our documentation, all of that process that we've talked about tonight to lead us to being able to somehow try and quantify this risk in a sense, trying to prioritise, because at the end of the day, we only have limited resources. Generally, we will not have the resources to manage every risk on every project. And so we go through this process. The objective here is to go through this whole process, as we've discussed from last week to tonight, to gain understandings on risk, perspectives on risk, to start to understand likelihood and consequence, and then the relationship between likelihood and consequence to determine that level of risk being low, medium, high, very high for priority. Because we may only have resources to actually put controls in place for the very high and high, all of this area here. Those
so Lisa,
areas yeah, go ahead, please.
Lisa, so taking Hasib's example of COVID, and if you were to classify within this table, it is a rare occurrence,
yes.
but the consequences could be catastrophic.
Could be catastrophic, yes. So it could be.
So you'll classify that as a high risk?
High. Could be up in this high, yes, we may well. We may well.
And then what do you do about it? Because it's a high risk, you cannot mitigate that.
Yes.
Because it's a rare occurrence. So so I'm just trying to figure that one out.
Yeah, I think it depends on the project too, Puneet. So we might have, I mean, now obviously there's a lot of controls around COVID in terms of, in terms of health controls, in terms of obviously compared to if we'd done this matrix back in, say, 2020, where it was all very much unknown, and obviously risk is about managing that unknown, uncertainty, versus now we may even say, look, the risk may not even be up in that high level. We might look at it a more moderate because of the level of, we have obviously vaccines, we have obviously treatments that have been put in place over the last few years that we didn't have back in, 2020. And so it may change from up in that very high back into even a more moderate because of that. But we may have issues with our supply chain that have not yet recovered from COVID because of that break to supply. So I think we might need to be even more specific there, Puneet, with your example when you say COVID, what does that mean? And what does it mean, say, to our project? And what are the examples? As I say, it might be more around not even our people now, but more around our supply chain. And so trying to understand that dynamic, because it is, as we said, it's very dynamic. It's always changing throughout our project. And it may have been high a little while ago, but that may be more moderate now because of controls. Interesting, isn't it? Very interesting.
Thank you.
Good point, Puneet. Really good point. Similarly, can I say, cybersecurity. You know, a couple of years, a bit like following COVID, wasn't it? You know, a couple of years ago, I know cybersecurity has always been important, not denying that for those of you working in that space. I'm sure you have always been very focused on risk and risk control, you know, risk management, that whole function of risk management around that. But it's certainly heightened, hasn't it? You know, we talk about the last couple of years when we've talked about some of these cyber attacks that have been, you know, very, very much targeting large organisations. You know, we talk about the likes of Optus or was it Medibank Private, you know, these very large organisations with very large, particularly customer or client base that, you know, we weren't talking about small groups of data or information. We're talking about millions of customers that are impacted. And so that whole cybersecurity space is probably heightened. You know, it might have been around even this moderate, perhaps around here, but now it's probably up in this, you know, this very high area now because that's changed given recent events. It's really interesting, isn't it? So dynamic risk. Dinner time? I realise everyone's gone quiet. It must be dinner time.
We're trying to reserve our remaining energy.
For Steve? Is that a good idea? Do we take a break? Get our eyes off the screen?
That's always a good idea.
It's always a good idea. What do you think, guys? Is everyone's good with that? Let's take it. Yep. Thanks, Donnie. I've got Sahar there, yep. So let's take a break. I'll leave that on screen. You can ponder that. I like Puneet, your point about COVID. And as I said, I'll introduce cybersecurity in there because it is a very dynamic space, our whole concept of risk and this whole unit on, you know, this particular function of our project in terms of managing project risk, very dynamic, constantly changing. Okay, let's take, what are we up to? 7:38. So let's rejoin at, say, 10:39. So, yeah, that gives us half an hour. I've got it 7:39. So, yeah, just on. I'll leave that on screen. We're on page, if you want to have a read, there's some nice definitions there on page 28. And, yeah, enjoy dinner or a break from the screen, or you might be just coffee time, whatever is helpful for you. To pace you through, and yeah, see you after that. We'll rejoin and continue on. We might even hop into, dare I say, the assessment. Take a little look at what we can start, scoping in there. Anyway, see you soon, guys. Cheers. Hello again, guys. Hopefully you've had a chance to refuel and refresh. And hoping we have sound.
We do.
Good on you, Hussey. Fantastic. Fantastic. So yeah, hopefully we've had a bit of a refresh and at the same time reflect on what we've talked about so far with some of those, you know, a lot of it's languages, and I talk about project management, having a vocab of its own, similarly risk management. Vivian, question. Is that a hello or a question, Vivian? Oh, back. Oh, that's good. I think that's a, sorry, I might have misinterpreted that as a, I'm back. So guys, before we dive in, I'd like to just check in with you around this. As I said, some of the language we've started to talk about. Obviously, that discussion last Wednesday evening and the first part of tonight was all around the process to, you know, identify risk, really explore risk. And now we're getting into the what we generally refer to as the analysis of risk and trying to quantify the risk. As we've said, the point of this risk matrix or impact table often we talk about is try and understand the relationship between the likelihood and the significance in terms of consequence or severity of risk. To then, as you can see on the table, try and put these into some level of priority, you know, low levels of risk, moderate levels of risk, high risk, very high risks. Yeah, so it is a process for us to try to analyse risk to determine these levels of priority. What are your thoughts there, using a tool like this? Some of you may already, some of you might be quite familiar with this through your risk assessment process at work, in your workplace. Or this might be very new. So, yeah, I'd like to get some feedback on this risk matrix. As we said, these labels are just examples. They would change across organisations, across projects even. And obviously everything what we do is very dynamic in this space of risk management, of course, as we've discussed.
Lisa, can I ask?
Nadia, please go ahead.
Would you identify the risk element in terms of, like, you know, we're looking at the likelihood and different levels, but do we identify the risk area itself?
So we might talk about, when you say risk area, do you mean like the categories of risks that we started to think about?
Like it could be like, you know, is it the risk gonna be in the delivery? Is it the risk gonna be like, you know, external environment? Is it gonna be like, you know, the physical environment of the project where it will be delivered? Is it gonna be the financial risk?
Very
I know,
good
like we talked
question.
about the human risk, but in these categories here, like, do we identify? So this would help us in terms of looking at what is it, and I guess the likelihood of this occurring.
Absolutely. I think this is a tool. I mean, if we get to, and we kind of, let me just check before I get ahead of myself. Usually we document all of this into a risk register. And hopefully, I hadn't quite gone this far ahead because I thought, well, that would do us. That's all on monetary. But I'm hoping, do we have a risk? Do we have a risk register? Let me just scroll. Hopefully, Nadia, this might answer your question. Hopefully, when we get to actually looking at, is it going to give me one? Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe not. I'll go to one of my trusted true and trusted ones that I have in my. No, it's not. No, it's not. There you go. There you go. All right, it doesn't. Okay. So when I talk about risk, often you'll grab this, have a document that, and I'll just be a little creative here for the sake of your question. Very good question.
Thank you.
And generally we'll have, often again, not always, but table form, because it's just how we are able to. Templates are obviously very helpful for organisations because it allows them to, consistently produce a document that at least allows their employees to think, well, what do we need to capture here, And so when we talk about a risk, often it'll be exactly what we talked about tonight. All of those risk categories, as you say, could be financial risk, could be a human risk. And so it goes on. And then often we have this area, this is usually pretty slim because it's just the category. And then we do a risk description. And I think this is, if I'm reading you correctly, this is where we actually explain the risk, So this is where, we outline basically the financial risk for our project.
Yeah.
Yeah. In other words, we could go over costs. This may happen
overspending,
because, exactly, any of the above. And then we do a little bit on what we call pretty much what we've just started to look at here, where we talk about the analysis. I guess it's analysis, but usually we break the analysis into two parts. And I'll pull this over here because usually, again, these labels are quite succinct, but we usually do a little bit on likelihood. So that's where we start to talk about how likely, unlikely, very likely, rare, all those wonderful, labels that we talked about. And generally, and I probably should have put another one in here because that's the one that really is the one that we start to, let me put one here to the right. Okay, so the next one is that wonderful relationship between likelihood and consequence, sometimes referred to as severity. So that's when we talk about, catastrophic, or minor, and that gives us our risk, usually ranking. So that's where it comes into that low or medium, or high. Or I think on that other table it had very high. So you could have 5. You could have, as I said, the labels will vary across organisations. Now, generally, the one to the right, and this is a really important one, is then what are we going to do about it? The actual, we talk about controls. What can we do to address? And as I say, these ones here are a little bit, and I could probably even be a little bit more. That's probably a bit more appropriate, where we spend a bit more time on these are a little bit short and sharp, aren't they, the labels? Yeah. But the risk controls, that's the one where we really get into
this is how we can
yes, we actually detail exactly the actions
what
needed.
strategies do we implement to monitor
exactly address and monitor
progress,
the ongoing risk. Not everything we can just write off and say avoid. We want to run our project.
Not that simple.
Exactly. We want to perform this work. We want to run our project. We want to do all of that. Now, generally, if I put
and we need to be accountable to our
correct
body. Yes,
100%. Who's doing what, almost, isn't it? But often that's sort of, and as I said, look, this is very, very rough and tumble, isn't it? But at least it gives you the point being that, let me just merge that. This would be an example in our project. We talk about project management language, and this is very similar to what if you've used these sorts of templates before, but this would be an example of a risk register that we would have in our documentation for our project, where we would go through this process for all of those risks that we would identify. exactly as you've said, Nadia. And the point being here, obviously, what we really want to get to is where we have some sort of ranking of our risks, so we can start to look at, well, as I said, we won't have the time, resources, often to manage every single risk that we identify. And so it's a case of saying, well, let's start, we have to at least have controls for, say, the very high and high. And then we work back from that. If we still have resources, we have time, maybe we then go to the mediums and we just leave the lows. And that will often then come back to that, we talked about that risk threshold. Yeah. What is it we really, So we may say, look, we only have the resourcing, and our sponsor says, no, just we need to have controls for those risks that have been ranked as very high and high. Yeah. And we accept that is our threshold. That is it. And then the rest of low and medium, we accept that. We won't do anything further to that. We obviously accept that risk is there. It is a residual risk, but we focus our energy, our resources to the very high and the high risks that have been ranked accordingly. Yeah. So that would be the document, like for me, and I do thank everyone that's worked on those workbooks. Sorry, I'm not being horrible in that, but it is one that's not in our workbook that I think is a really important, it pulls everything together, everything we've talked about from, this identification stage, what we did almost last Wednesday, where we started to think, well, what are those, those areas where we may have, starting to look at some of those categories. And then, of course, we start to detail on what we've talked about tonight, trying to put some labels around, particularly around likelihood and consequence. And then we obviously need a little matrix, like we just looked at before, to give us that risk ranking. You need a tool to do that. And then from there, of course, what do we do about it, which we'll get to that. That's pretty much what we'll do on Wednesday night. But, it's a great question, Nadia, because I think what that forces us to think about is, as a project manager, we need to have, like everything we do, don't we? We document everything to do with our project. In the planning phase, we're going through all of the plans we need, and a key plan we need, of course, with this unit is the risk management plan. And a key document is bringing all of what we've talked about from last Wednesday and tonight into this, what we call a risk register. And this would be something most projects I've worked at, we would be reviewing this every project meeting, going through and say, okay, where is this risk? It's like, yep, still at that level. Okay, we leave that. Okay, where is this next, this human? Oh, no, we're no longer, and we can retire those risks off. And then equally, we have new risks that come in because our project work changes. It's all a dynamic, as we've said, change. Puneet's question before about change management, that's such a relevant aspect of risk management. It is constantly changing. And so we're constantly reviewing this, as I said, if this is part of our, even our weekly review meetings, to say, well, are those risks still relevant? Has it changed? Or, can we retire? Or are there new risks we had not considered in our initiation phase that we now need to start planning for? Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess, at the end of the day, the clearer our risk management plan is, the better our reporting mechanism would be. Indeed. In terms of complying. It's about being compliant with all the necessary steps in order to submit our reporting.
Absolutely. And I think it's a little bit too, Nadia, and this is for all of us, isn't it? This could be brand new, or you could be looking at this for the first time, or this could be something quite, you've done this at work, but it is also about your muscle memory. This is our brains where we go, okay, we become, there's a sense of familiarity when we start talking about risk categories, likelihood, consequence, so if a new risk emerges that we had not considered, it's not like we just, it might throw us for a little bit, we might go, oh, whoa, okay. But we have a process. So we go, okay, new risk. What do we do? Okay, well, how do we categorize that? Let's describe it. What is, we need to put words around this. We need to understand, what does this mean? We need to measure, try and quantify likelihood, try and quantify consequence to give us a ranking. We have a process. So whilst the risks themselves, as I said, come in and out of project and change, of course, that key word again, change, the process we use is consistent. Yeah. Hopefully, Nadia, that kind of answers your question, hopefully.
Thank you.
Around, yeah.
Thank you. That's been very comprehensive. Thank you.
Pleasure. But I think that's for me. And you might even want to get a screenshot. Obviously, it's on this recording anyway, guys. But yeah, a screenshot of something, because it is not in the workbook, and I think it is a really, it's a key deliverable for us. As a project manager, we would be delivering this. This would be our risk register that we keep for all of our risks that we document. As I said, constantly changing. We'll have a risk register. It's like you have version 1, isn't it?
Yeah.
Version 1 as at perhaps, at the initiation of our project, or when we go into the planning stage, if we're doing our plans now in August, but then in September that will change, and in October, and, so
to be
these
reviewed,
would be
yes.
dated as at, because of this constant theme of change, great question. Thanks, Nadia.
Thank you.
Lisa, will you put this risk register in the documents, in the files?
Yeah, I'll put it in. How about I save it here and pop it in our Teams room? I'll just put it as an exemplar. As I say, it's not.
Thank you so much.
I'm sure you'll have much more sophisticated ones. I just didn't have one handy to just jump in, and I thought, oh look, it's basically that's the sort of table, I guess, that you would use.
It's a good template to start
exactly. And I'm sure if you do a bit of research, you'll find some brilliant ones anyway, but it's just I'll just put here risk register exemplar, and I'll pop that in our room so you've got that done. Great question, guys, as always. Fantastic. So I'll go to risk now, and we'll have files in here. I think we've got our workbook and excuse me, risk. And it's all there. So let's pop our table in here as well, and we're brilliant. Let's put that in there. Try that again. Uploading done. Yeah. So there you go, guys. There's an exemplar in there, and I encourage you to do a bit more research. As I said, look, I'm sure you get to work and you'll have others, but at least that will show. I just like something like that to say, look, this is how we pull it all together. We should be very and while you might find ones that are more complicated, or not complicated, but allow more layers, I should say. I think as long as you've got these key areas, it would satisfy the purpose. We are, by our very nature, in terms of project management, we're planners. That's what we do. We spend a lot of our activity planning and of course risks will in some way impact that positively, or it can be an opportunity. There can also be threats to that, and so the documentation to support that is important, because these are also the risk register, like version 1. That's an assumption we're making, isn't it? We talk about assumptions that's an assumption we're making. So in the early stages, if we've come on board, maybe our project's been initiated and we're now putting together, this is our risk management plan. We are making assumptions about those risks as at the date, as at the 7th of August, we are making assumptions about that risk, and that's why it's so important that we document, because someone will come back later and say, why did that, why did you do that? Why did this happen in the problem? And it's like, well, this was based on this risk register as at that date. We made an assumption about that risk at that date. We took that to sponsor approved, we went through the process. So whilst our content changes, and yes, risks may come in and exit, retire and then come on board our project, our process is consistent right through. And I think that's an important point. Well, I mean, with all of our functions, but certainly with our function now, we're looking at being management of project risk. Really important. Questions? Any other thoughts or ideas, or we dive in? Will we dive in and have a little look at this assessment? The one, Maria was very kind, as always. I know Maria's not here tonight.
Let's do it.
What's that?
I said, let's do the assessment.
Let's do it. Okay. Let's do it. So let me go to our files here. We've got a draft document here. Might just grab that one and I'll just download to make sure that, I think Maria kindly integrated the appendices. Nice little bit of teamwork. Big shout out. Thanks to Maria for that. I'll download a copy. Very good. And save that one. Beautiful. And I'll just save that and close it off in here. Done. And risk. And oh, I did have it, but that's okay. I'll save it again just to make sure it's updated. Yeah. Brilliant. Let me just go back here and close that off. So if anybody else needs to download. Wonderful. So that's our project 2 of 2 draft, as always. As always, and I should navigate just to show you where I've got that from. The same Maria's wonderful contribution there, risk. And that one. Let's see, let's get our TDC just so we've got our navigation consistent for all of us. Show you across all this now. I've been looking at all the access points and you've all been busy, which is fantastic. Some of you even have finished that sustainability assessment for the first unit, so that's wonderful. Anyway, task at hand, manage project risk. Where are we? Ah, there we go. What's that? The third row down. 1, 2, third row down. Yeah, risk. I'll start that and I'll, as always, excuse me, the unit lessons on here mirror our workbook. So we have the 5 lessons, which of course are our 5 workbook topics. And of course, we've spent a bit of last week on topic 1, lesson 1, and then tonight gone from topic 1 into topic 2, lesson 2. So we'll, excuse me, obviously continue work with that on Wednesday evening, which will be lovely. Lovely to see you all again, if your schedule permits, at Bankstown. And then, of course, this is the one, unit assessment. And our, as always, we have 2 events, our knowledge assessment, as we said previously, our quiz. And as I've said before, you've got 10 attempts to that, so I'm confident you'll work through that. Of course, if you get, you know, up to, say, 8th attempt and something's really, you know, frustrating you, please email me and we'll work it through, just so we don't have to unravel if you use your 10 attempts. That makes it a little bit awkward, so... and I don't want to see you stressed either, so I'm only an email away. And then we have, of course, this one. This is our project assessment. So this is it, where Maria's done a bit of integration. We've obviously got one assessment document and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 supporting documents. So that's where that's the source of that information, and that will then get you to this one that started to look at tonight, our project assessment. And so I'll just start scrolling here and we can perhaps start to brainstorm, contribute and share a few ideas of what needs to go where. So this is project 1. Ah, we have a CRM. There you go. Hasib, this is your CRM. CRM implementation. Oops.
I actually opened the assessments previously and I saw it CRM and conference.
CRM. Oh, look, we have got a risk register. Brilliant. Save a copy of the risk register template. Brilliant. There you go. Risk register. So that's just what I've pretty much shown you, but you can use this one in here. Identify and document amount 3. Okay, so we've got a risk register and we need to do that. And we've got 3 risks. Okay, 3 identified risks. 3 identified risks. Prepare a minimum of 3 questions. Okay, so that's for our stakeholder meeting. We'll probably do that and upload. Okay, so this is our risk. Okay, so the risk register, let me just go to those supporting documents that we had in our TDC, my downloads. Can I just download them? Go back. This one here, risk register. Oh, there we go. Risk register. I might download all of them while I'm at it. register, lessons learned. Lessons learned and stakeholders. Very good. Okay. All right. So now we can go to our downloads and grab those. Beautiful. So we have a risk register, which hopefully looks like, yeah, very good. So this is, it's not really a register, is it? It's a matrix. All right. So we can set it up like what we just talked about, didn't we? So we can set it up here. It's not going to do that. No, it's going to knock that around. We'll put it over here. That might be better. So we want a risk register. Oh, no, it's here, data and descriptions. Is it? No, that's not at all. They're just definitions. Risk scoring. So we might put on the third tab. So what I'm going to do is pretty much what I just did. That's actually quite good. Let's grab what I just did here. This one here. And I'm going to, excuse me, while I just thank you for your patience. I am going to take that out and I'm going to grab that. Beautiful. And that's what I'm going to use. You don't have to use exactly that. Actually, I'll put it here. Yeah. Okay, so let's put, just going to set this up. I'll give you a bit of time. You guys can play around. It doesn't have to look like this, but I'm just going to take pretty much what we just did. And then, yeah, something like that. Something like that would give you, yes, much better. It would be an example of a, that's how I've done it anyway. It makes sense to me. So just on your Excel sheet, when you open this up, just rename that one. Risk register, yeah. So you've got on your actual, what is it, Excel sheet? Yes, on your Excel sheet, you've got here, hopefully you can see the tabs, the risk scoring. Oh, okay. Okay, so when you open this Excel sheet up, the first tab, there's that risk scoring, which is essentially our matrix. That's our key, isn't it? The codes we're going to use, the labels, the matrix we're going to use to prioritize the risk. And then we're going to have some data and descriptions. So that's all there to help us basically understand the risks. But this is the one that we're actually, this is like our deliverable. The others are inputs. This is our output. This is what we'll deliver. And we've got to have, we need to have one risk and then two risks and three risks. So it's really up to you which risks. I don't think, oh, it's very interesting. Well, let's do that. I don't think, and I'll just go back to the scenario to look at over here, shall I? Yeah. Which three risks in the scenario have been provided. So I'll just hop in. But yeah, something like that I think would be probably helpful as a risk register in terms of the template.
Lisa?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think there's a tab which says risk register. There's already a risk register over there on the Excel sheet.
Is there?
Yeah, just go on the dots.
Oh, there you go. It is.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Well, there you go. Even better than mine. Even better. There you go. Beautiful. So you don't need to do that. Let's get rid of that. Let's delete that. Beautiful. Good one. Thanks, Burnett. I don't know why I couldn't see that earlier. Very slack. But yeah, project, there you go. So that's your template. So you're going to write, use this template, I should say, to document three risks. 1, 2, and 3. But I just think what we do, it's pretty much the same. We've got a category, yeah, so that's good, whether it's human or financial, any of the risks. Then the actual risk description. Well, there you go, pretty much on it. Potential impact. So we could call that what would happen. That's again, it's probably around consequence. What's our response? Our mitigation action. Yeah, so you'll leave these blank initially. You'll basically just do your probability and impact. Yeah, they are different columns. But anyway, a bit similar. A couple of these. You don't need to fill all of this out to start with, but I just want to hop to the simulation. Just want to have a look in this simulation, what it says about our CRM. Here we go. So we have two projects. Okay, so the first project, we'll just focus on this one for the moment tonight, is our customer relationship management CRM software. So that's the one. This is the project we're working on at the moment. We have another one, but we'll get to that later. You've been tasked by the CEO to take on the role of risk manager. Yeah, very good. Yeah, CRM. Okay, so for CRM, this is our context for this project. Have a quick briefing. Let's see. CRM will set to start and needs to be completed within 6 weeks, or will go over budget. 5-person project team will be involved or working from the office. 1 individual in the project team is an external implementation consultant who will be working internally with the team, but has not completed, oh, that's interesting, not completed the usual onboarding processes required for regular employees and won't have time. This raised some confidentiality, absolutely. Staff need to be using the CRM within 2 weeks of rollout completion to avoid losing customer data and other essential information. Again, also says work health and safety policy and ICT risk management policy should be consulted. We have a project team for the rollout. Donna is our project coordinator who will help with preparing training materials. Dan is the IT manager, has experience working at an IT consultancy and is familiar with, okay, that's good. Amanda is an IT specialist, good. Oh, but has no background. Okay, so there's some risks here. We'll be supporting Dan in taking the lead. Charles Bennett, external IT, who is coming in for 6 weeks only. Yep, so there's risks, yeah. Okay, so that's task 1. So I might give you a few minutes, have a read. I'm conscious we all read at different paces and need a bit of time just to process that. So I'm looking at page 4. Well, I've just took that through, but I want you to have a read of page 4. Task 1, that's what we're at, the risk register of that simulation. So let me just pop back here to the chat and I'll ask you to please read page 4 of the simulation pack and use this time to brainstorm. You want to have at least 3. So if you can brainstorm, say 3 risks for this CRM project, have a think. I know we just sometimes need some quiet time. I'll stop talking and give you maybe have about 5-6 minutes on that, and then we'll come back as a group and then maybe do a bit of brainstorming about potential risks. Have a read. Yes, Hasid, go ahead.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead.
How important it is that all of my 3 risks are from specifically this simulation?
As long as it's based on the CRM.
No, it will be based on CRM.
As long as it's based on, no, that's fine. It doesn't have to be as per that script. So I'm happy if you be creative, that's fine.
Perfect, thank you.
Beautiful. But for some of us that are just getting in this space, it's nice to have that script to go back to. So yes, you can use that script as a start But yeah, Hasib, I'm fine. That's fine. You can be creative. It's all good.
Thank you.
It's all good. So anyway, guys, have some time. I'll stop talking now. And yeah, have 5 minutes and I'll have a read. I'll leave that on the screen. Page 4. Get a bit. The purpose of this, have a read and think about what could be some of the risks to our CRM project. See you shortly. Have a think. Okay, guys. Hopefully you've had a bit of a chance. As I said, I appreciate we all work at different paces, which is fine. But yeah, hopefully you've had a chance of a read of that briefing information, and hopefully have some ideas for some risks for our CRM project. What are your thoughts?
So I've made 3 issues, but I'm going to wait for somebody else to come through.
Why don't you just give me, what about start, just give me one.
Financial.
Do you want to start with one?
Yeah, the first one is financial.
Financial risk. Category, financial. Financial risk. I might put here, could include. These are just ideas. Yeah, very good. How did you explain that? Hasib, what's your
page sorry, wait, where was it? Sorry, you have to bear with my dementia.
No, you're right, it's all good. It's all good.
Okay, so on page 4, task 1, if you see the first dot point, it says the CRM implementation is set to start immediately and needs to be completed within 6 weeks or will go over budget.
Yeah, okay. So basically it's that. So I said, I'll put here, please include an explanation.
Right, now,
such as
my risk was
the issue. Yeah.
Now I'll let you complete.
Triple constraints. So you want to hold that for a minute? We'll see if anyone else. Is that what you want to do?
No, I've got it completed. I was gonna wait for you to complete writing.
Oh, cool. Go ahead.
Okay, so my risk was that due to the recent global situation, supply chains may be affected, thus fluctuating cost of equipment involved.
On supply chain pressures. Very good. Well, not very good that they're happening, but very good that you are, pressures. Oh, good.
No, if I'm a supplier, it's very good.
Yeah, it's that's exactly right. Oh, very good. I said touche. Touche.
Now, the potential impact.
What do you think?
Increased end cost as compared to budgeted amounts.
Such as the increase, increasing costs, for a project. Something about, actual. We can talk about here, cost exceeding planned costs. Beautiful. That's a possible.
You just gave me a word. I'm going to change to budgeted to planned. Thank you, Lisa.
That's our cost management, isn't it? Beautiful.
Now the response to that is control,
not
mitigate.
Yeah, because that's a drop down, isn't it? I've just got a drop down. Beautiful. Yes. So we control that. Brilliant. Beautiful. Complete. Now this is, I think we leave this, don't we? Because this is completed. We'll come back to that later. At the moment, we're just doing the probability impact, I think.
Is it?
Because we'll come back to that. I think we've got to do a completed one at the end of our project.
Elisa, is the completed mitigation, that's like it's after you complete, and how did the progress proceed with the end result?
I think also too, I'm not quite sure. I haven't gone right. I think we have to go back at some point. We have some more, like in our simulation, Nadia, when we go back to the simulation, and I'm guessing here, but if I do go a little bit further, when we get to, I think it's task 5, we've got around halfway through the project, when conducting a project risk review, you received the following 3. So I think this is then an update. So I think we might have to do an update at that point. Yeah. So I think at the moment, as long as we've got our risk identified, I think that's basically, yeah, I think we're probably nicely covered there. And, you know, what we'll do is this is just a draft, so we'll work through this over the next couple of weeks. So we can come back and add to this anyway, okay?
Yeah.
The main point tonight, conscious of time too, my goodness, it's getting away, isn't it? I just wanted to just have something, so you know what I always say, I don't want you to have a blank page to start with. So has anyone got another risk rather than, we might leave that there. Thank you, Hasib, for that great insight into financial risk for our CRM project. Has anyone got another risk they might like to share? Just as an example.
I have a risk.
Yes. Is that Lama?
Sorry. Yeah. Hi.
Hi. What have you got, Lama? Please.
I don't have the categories, like I actually have no idea what is the category, but
Yeah,
it's the
so
risk
go
of
ahead, give
being
me your
late.
description. Maybe we'll work backwards. Hey.
Yeah. It's the risk of not finishing the CRM implementation on time.
Yes.
And that would lead to losing customer data and other essential information.
Yeah, that's right.
Especially that the staff needs to be using the CRM within 2 weeks.
Yes, that's right. Otherwise we lose data. Yes, that's right.
But I haven't figured out the category. Is it
That's
like
okay.
physical?
Yeah, time. That's okay.
We can say not meeting the deadline.
Is that the risk? Is that one of our fields? What have we got? We've got operations, people and culture. Oh, probably knowledge, because we're going to lose information, aren't we? Environment.
And failing to deliver on time, which may impact on her marketing plan.
Yes, that's very true. That's very true with the CRM software. That's a very good point. That's a very good point. Not finishing CRM. What did I put there? On time, sorry. Should be implementation. Very good. Yeah. So as I say, these are just rough ideas. You will expand on these, of course, but at least we'll give you a bit of a start for this task. Impact is, loss of, I think it had something like 2 weeks, wasn't it, following implementation. Loss of customer data. Yeah. Could be an exemplar. Very good, Lama.
Thank you.
Thank you. Fantastic.
Lisa, my apologies for jumping the queue here.
Go ahead.
When do you plan on doing the stakeholder meeting?
I think we should do that. What's this Wednesday's date? The 9th. So the following. So the 16th would be the plan.
All right. Sweet. Thank you. How's
that sit with the diary, Hasib?
I'm so sorry, but honestly, that was the thing. I'm
No,
like
no, that's okay. That's okay. You can jump. We'll go. What we might actually do is we might leave it here tonight because I'm conscious of time. I know we've only got 2, but you can sleep on it. And I will save this. I save this up to our Teams room anyway, as always. And when we get together on Wednesday night at Bankstown, I'd like to explore this a bit more with you, and then we'll do a bit more work on these documents as well. And I think we'll look at, I want to spend a bit of time on the simulation, Hasib, because I think that will then answer your question. We'll do a bit more exploration on Wednesday so that I'm hoping by then the following Wednesday, we're all comfortable to sit down and start well, not all of us. I think I'll probably do it over 2, you know how last time I did sort of half one night and half the, because it's a lot of us. I know there's a few groups. So if we have like 4 groups, we might do 2 one night and 2 the next, but we can talk about that on Wednesday. So we'll basically get together on Wednesday night at Bankstown. We'll go through it all, we'll do have a planning session for it. So then we're ready to start the role plays the following Wednesday. What did we say? The 16th of August. Yeah.
Lisa, can I ask you something?
Yes, of course. Go ahead.
Can you please record the Wednesday session?
Of course.
In case I couldn't come, but I will try to come. But in case,
sure, no worries. If you can't, can you send me an email to remind me? And I will do that. Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Lama.
Thank you.
Very good. All right, guys. As I said, I know we haven't got right through that, but that's okay. It's all work in progress, isn't it? It's what we do. That's what we do. Hopefully, as I said, I'll save this anyway, and I'll pop that into our, let's save that so we can put that into our Teams room. And you've got some ideas there, at least to start. As I say, I put a lot of dots and there's lots of such as an example, but that's great for you. At least you can take it and make it your own. Thanks, guys. Fantastic. Thanks for your contributions, as always. As always.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks, you
Lisa.
so much. Fantastic. And I'll see you. I look forward to working with you on Wednesday night at Bankstown.
See you, Lisa.
See you Wednesday.
Awesome,
Thank you,
guys.
Lisa.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Lisa.
I'll see you then.
Thanks, Lisa. See you,
Good
everyone.
night. Take care.
Thanks, Lisa.
All right, bye.
Cheers. See you Wednesday.